There you go. Okay, we are on Daf Lamed Ches Samad Aleph. It's about 8 lines down. We were talking about the prohibition of bishul akum, and we pointed out that there are limitations to this prohibition. If it's nechal kamoshu chai, if you have a food that is just as edible raw as it is cooked, so it's not subject to the prohibition of bishul akum. Let's say a carrot, for example. Another limitation is if it's not ola al shulchan milachim, if it's not a significant food, if it's a poor man's food that a king would not find on his table, so then it's not subject to the prohibition of bishul akum. And Rashi tells us that the rabbis enacted this prohibition because of a concern that if we allow a Gentile to habitually cook for you, he'll eventually feed you something that's prohibited. And that seems to fit in with some of the things that we'll see in the Gemara today. Okay, let's take a look. Omar Rav Asi, Omar Rav. Dagim ketana meluchim ein bahem mishum bishulei ovdei kochavim. You have small salted fish. If a goy were to cook those afterwards, let's say like salted anchovies or herring or something like that, that's not subject to bishul akum, because since it's edible in its salted, uncooked state, cooking it does not change it enough to be subject to the prohibition. Amar of Yosef, im tzalan ovei kochavim samach yisol aleim mishum eruv de tafshilin, v'avdinu ovei kochavim kasa daharsana asur. He says, if we wanted to couch this in another halacha, we could say it like this. If a Gentile took those salted fish and roasted them, you could use those roasted fish as your cooked food for an eruv tafshilin. No problem. But if he took that fish and made it into a karsa daharsana, which is a certain kind of fish patty, like a croquette, where they would take flour, mix it with the pieces of fish and the brine and the schmaltz, and they would make it into like a fish croquette, fry it up, so that you can't use for an eruv tafshilin.
Not fish and chips, is it?
No, no. So that's you're about 10 centuries off, but that's okay. So the Gemara now says,
these guys weren't British.
Yeah.
Several thousand kilometers.
Right, and several thousand kilometers. So the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't that obvious that it's going to be usher? Because what's the problem with the fish croquette? The problem is the flour that's added into the croquette is creating the isser. That's what's creating the isser, because the goy is cooking the flour. And that's the bishul akum issue, not the fish, but the flour. The Gemara says, "Mahu detema harsana ikar kamashmal and kimcha ikar," because you might have thought that the flour is ancillary to the fish, so it doesn't matter if he cooks it because that's not the main part of the food. So the chiddush is that no, the flour is just as substantive as the fish part is, at least. Amar Rav Brona, Amar Rav, obi kochavim shehitzis esor ba'agam kol hachagavim sheba'agam azurim. What a weird case. A goy goes ahead out into a marshy, grassy field, and he wants to get rid of all the locusts, because locusts can be pesty, right? And so he ignites the field to kill all the locusts. So that's one way to do it, right?
To listen to Smokey the Bear.
Right. So the question now is, you've got all of these delectable roasted locusts that are kosher.
Oh.
But the thing is, he says, no, you can't eat the locusts. Sorry, they're usher. So the Gemara says, hey chidam. So you gotta explain this case more carefully. He says, if there's multiple species of locust in this field and you don't know which ones are kosher, which ones are not kosher, well then it shouldn't make a difference whether the goy ignites it or whether a Jew ignites it. Once they're roasted, it's hard to tell the difference, and so they should all be aser. So ela mishum bishulei ovdo kochavim ki hai gavna mi aser. And if you're telling me the problem is because of bishul akum, because a goy is cooking the locusts, but that in itself, that shouldn't be a problem, because remember, what was his objective?
Grammar.
His objective was not to cook locusts. His objective was to get rid of the locusts out of the field. And in the situation where the goy's objective is not to cook, but cooking is a byproduct, that does not fall under the prohibition of bishul akum, as we'll show from this case. Amar Rav Chanan bar Ami, Amar Rabbi Pedas, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Hai Oved Kochavim, Decharich Reisha, Shari Lemechel Minei, Afilu Me Reish Unye. That if you have, let's say, the head of an animal that was slaughtered, and a goy goes ahead, usually you skin off all of the skin and the hair, but there's very delicate skin that is edible on the head, and so he just wants to get rid of the hair. So what they would typically do is they would singe the hair to burn it off. If a goy does that, even though there may have been some very soft tissue, like by the ear, that may have been cooked as a result of his singeing, it nevertheless is permitted to eat that. So, alma la avure sar komichavein hachanami legiluye agama komichavein. So you see, if his intention was not to cook, but rather to get rid of the hair, it's not a problem. And similarly, if his intention is to clear the field of locusts and not to cook locusts, it shouldn't be a problem. So the Gemara answers, you're right. La'olam delo yada heitar veheitame, u'maisa shahaya ba'obi kochavim haya. So the Gemara says, you're right. That's not the issue. The issue is not bishul akum. The issue is because we don't know which species are kosher and which are not kosher. Why then did you talk about a goy lighting the field? Because Rav Brona had that shaila brought before him, that a goy lit the field. It just so happened. But in Achinami, even if a Jew had done it, it would still be problematic.
Rashi points out that you don't need to shech a locust.
Correct. You don't need to shech the locust.
Just Rashi points that out.
He points that out. Right. That's right. Because if you needed to shecht it, so then you'd have another problem. It wasn't shechted properly.
The arbitrator.
Right. I knew a guy in my shul from Morocco. He told me that when he was a kid, the street vendors used to sell roasted locust. No, roasted locust. He said that you cracked them open like a pistachio, and you would eat the inside. So he remembers. Anyway, they used to fry them. Okay, gufa. All right, I'm not going to do that. Amar Rav Chanan bar Ami, Amar Rab Das, Amar Rab Yechanan, Hai Obe Kochavim Decharach Reisha Shoy Lemechel Minei Afilu Me Rosh Unye. So going back to that case that the goy is singeing the hairs off of the head of the animal, even if as a byproduct of his singeing he ends up cooking some of the soft tissue like by the ear, it's still okay to eat it. Amar Ravina Hilka Chayil V'Kochavim Deshada Sichta La'atuna V'Kover Ba Yisrael Kara Meikara Shapir Dami. He says, based on that, let's say a goy opens up the oven and he throws in a non-edible item, like a peg that's used in construction. And he's putting it in the oven because he wants to harden it because it's, let's say, soft or it's wet or whatever it is. He wants to dry it out and get it really hard. But he doesn't realize that there's been a pumpkin in the oven that a Jew had put in previously, but the oven was not lit. So he goes ahead and lights the oven to dry out his peg, and as a byproduct, he ends up cooking the pumpkin. He says, that's also okay. That's not a problem of bishul akum since he wasn't intentionally doing it. So pshita. So the Gemara says, well, that's obvious based on our last case. So ma'udatema levishulei mana komichavein, komash balon l'shirurei mana komichavein. So you might have thought, no, that as long as he's intending to cook something, even something inedible like a peg, that's called intentionally cooking, and therefore the pumpkin would be asur. And the chiddush is that no, you don't cook pegs, you dry them out or you harden them. And therefore it's not the same thing as bishul, and therefore there's no prohibition of bishul akum. Amar of Yehuda Amar Shmuel Hiniach Yisrael Basra Gabe Gechalim Uvo Avichavim Vahafach Bo Mutter. So Shmuel now says something that has very important applications in the prohibition of bishul akum. As we'll see, this whole Gemara is leading us along the way to say that even though bishul akum is asur, if a Jew is involved in some step of the cooking process, it obviates the problem of bishul akum. So here's the first case. A Yisrael places meat on hot coals to roast, and then a goy comes afterwards and stokes the coals, or stokes the meat, or flips the meat over, right? So the halacha is that meat is still mutter. Heichidami. So what's the case? Ilema de ilo hafach be hava bashal pshita. He said, I don't understand. If the goy would not have stoked it at all, it would still cook. So then obviously he's not contributing. Elalav de lo hafach lo hava bashal amai mutter b'shalei v'kochavim ninu. But so then what's the other alternative? That if he wouldn't stoke it, the meat wouldn't cook. So then why isn't it bishul akum? So the Gemara answers, Lo tzricha de ilo hafach hababashel betarte shoi v'hashtaka bashel bechada shaita. Mahu de tema karovi bishula milsehi kamash malon. The Gemara says, here's the case. If you just put the meat on the coals without stoking them, the meat would take 2 hours to cook. Now that the goy is stoking everything and flipping over the system, so then it'll only take 1 hour to cook. You might think that that's enough of a bishul akum problem to make it prohibited. Kamash malon that it's not. So the Gemara now says, but wait a minute. V'ha'amar Reb Asi, Amar Reb Yechanan, Kol shu k'maichel ben drusai, ein bo mishum bishulei ovdei kol chavim. Ha'eno k'maichel ben drusai, yesh bo mishum bishulei ovdei kol chavim. But 1 second, Reb Yochanan was quoted as saying, is that any meat that is not at least partially cooked, what's called k'maichel ben drusai, like either a third or a half of the way cooked, if a goy starts cooking it at that point when it's still raw, if he participates in the cooking process, so then it's a problem of bishul akum. So over here, a Jew put the meat raw, and the goy a second later starts stoking it. So why isn't it usher according to this? The Gemara answers, Hasam kigon da'osvei besilta v'shakle ovekochavim v'osvei betanura. So the Gemara says, no, Rabbi Yochanan was talking about a case where a Jew takes raw meat and leaves it in a basket where there's no heat. In that situation, for the goy to transfer the meat onto a heat surface, he's doing bishul akum, and therefore it's usher. But over here, the Jew has begun the process of cooking by putting it on a heat surface, and all the Gentile is doing now is taking that raw meat that's about to cook and stoking it further. Since a Jew has participated in the cooking process by putting it on the coals, it's no longer a problem of bishul akum. Tanya nami hachi, miniach Yisrael basral gabe gecholim uva'o b'kochavim u'mahapech bo, ad sheyavu yisol mi beis ha'knesses u'mi beis ha'medrash ve'eno choshesh. And we have this similar idea that a Jew is allowed to put the meat on the coals, and even while it's still raw, the Gentile is allowed to stoke it and turn it over while the Jew is going about his business by going to shul or going to the beis medrash. So the Jew says, here, I'm putting the stuff in the oven or on the stovetop. I'm going to go daven mincha. I'll be back in a few minutes. Watch it and take care of it, help it cook while I'm away. And the same thing is, sofesis isha kedera al gabe kira ubas ovedes kolchavim umegisa achetovo mi beis hamerchotz mi beis hakneses ve'eno chosheshes. And the same thing, a woman could say to the maid, she says, I'm putting this on the stove, keep stirring the pot to make sure it doesn't burn while I go to the bathhouse or to the beis hakneses. I too have to go to shul, says the woman. And it's not just Shabbos morning, because Shabbos you can't cook. She's going to mincha. Right? You know, back in those days, a lot of women used to go to shul during the week, not like today. And there's no problem. There's no problem. And it's all because the Jewess or the Jew is participating in the issue. I can't tell you how wise Chazal were in this prohibition. Remember, it's all because if you leave them to their own devices in the kitchen, they're not going to know. You have to be involved. As long as you're involved and they know that you could pop in at any time, then it's okay. You know how many times it's come up where someone has said, you know what, I'm Shomer Shabbos, but I'm not so machmir on all of these other details. So I'll let my non-Jewish domestic help make dinner for the kids and so forth. And all of a sudden you find out she couldn't find the margarine, so she used butter instead.
You turn the oven on.
But no, what I'm saying is that the reason for the prohibition, I'm not going to be so frum, I'm not going to be makbid on bishul akum, right? But if the whole reason is because of mamish kashrus issues, look what, I'm just saying that this is what, this stuff really happens. It's maisim b'chol yom. So there's a lot of wisdom in this halacha. And we shouldn't scoff at it or take it lightly. Ibayalu, hiniach obe kolchavim v'hafach Yisrael mahu. So now the question is, what if the process is in the reverse? Instead of the Jew putting down the raw meat and the goy flipping it or stoking it, what if the goy puts down the raw meat and the Jew flips it or stokes it? So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak kal v'chomer gomer biad oivi kolchavim mutter gomer biad Yisrael kol shekei. So he says, Rav Nachman, it's a kal v'chomer. If when the Gentile finishes the cooking and renders it now edible, it's still mutter because the Jew started it, then surely when the Gentile starts it and leaves it when it's mostly raw and the Jew finishes it and makes it edible, surely it's going to be mutter. So Itmar Nami Amar Rabba bar Barchana Amar Rabbi Yechanan Varmila Amar Rav Acha bar Barchana Amar Rabbi Yechanan Bein Shehiniach Obei Kochavim V'Hafach Yisrael Bein Shehiniach Yisrael V'Hafach Obei Kochavim Mutter. And this was said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. It doesn't make a difference whether the goy put down the raw food and the Jew stokes it, or whether the Jew put down the raw food and the goy stokes it. It's always okay. It's only aser when both the beginning and the ending of the cooking was done by a Gentile. And Amar Ravina, and Ravina says, sort of like even more authoritatively and even more explicitly lenient, he says, Hilchesa harifta de shagar obe kolchavim vafa Yisrael inamar shagar Yisrael vafa obe kolchavim inami shagar obe kolchavim vafa obe kolchavim vasa Yisrael v'chatabel chituye shapir dami. He says like this, when you're talking about baking bread, which is also subject to, pas akum, he says, doesn't matter whether the goy puts it in the oven and the Jew lights it and cooks it, bakes it, or whether the Jew put the bread and the dough in the oven and the goy lights up the oven and cooks it, or even if the goy puts the dough in the oven and ends up baking it, but all the Jew did was to stoke the coals a little bit. And that's all the Jew did, just had one little stage in the cooking process, everything is fine. And that's something that we rely on, so that even if the goy starts the rice, or starts whatever she's cooking, starts cooking the meat even, right, in your house, it's okay if she turned on the flame. Now, as a matter of course, the minhag of most housewives is that they turn on the flame. But even if the goy turns on the flame, but I go while it's cooking and I stir it, so then it's also not subject to bishul akum.
This
now,
does not apply to meat, because when they would put on meat and you lose track of the meat.
No, as long as it's in your house, it's okay. As long as it's in your house, if that were not the case, then how could we ever leave meat in our freezer and leave the goita alone? The answer is because since it's in our house and there's an issue of mirsas, they're worried that we could come home at any time. So then it's all right. Then it's okay. So we're not so worried about that. Now,
How come when sometimes it's early in a fair because I'm playing and the waiter says to me, "Oh, please write the sternum for me," but the food is fully cooked. They're putting it just to warm it up. I mean,
why do they do that? Because the hashgacha agencies know it's too confusing. It's too confusing to say if it's cooked, you don't have to have the Jew light the sternum. If it's not, no. The policy across the board is any time there's fire, the Jew has to light the fire. Period. Nikuda. Dag Maliach.
Question.
Yeah.
Today's Christians, we keep saying this, are not akums.
For this halacha, it's any non-Jew is subject to the prohibition of bishul akum. It's not just idolaters. Remember, it's not because of idolatry. It's because the rabbis were scared that they would feed you something not kosher. That's got nothing to do with whether they're Christian or Muslim or Hindu or heathens. Doesn't make a difference.
I thought it was also an issue of intermarriage.
So according to Rashi, not. That's the wine. That's the wine issue.
Not the pas?
The pas might also be an issue of chasnus, but bishul akum, Rashi says, now it could be you have to look in the other Rishonim. I haven't researched all of the Rishonim. But Rashi says clearly it's got to do with kashrus. Right? And by the way, if the issue is chasnus, that's also an issue with a Christian. What, it's okay to marry a Christian?
No.
Okay. So anyway.
When you're having your nanny cooking for you, there's no issue of chasnos. It's got to be kashrus.
It's kashrus.
Yeah.
It's kashrus. Dag maliach. Okay, now, what about a Gentile who salts a fish, like he makes herring? Is that a problem of bishul akum because he's not cooking on the one hand, but at the other hand, he's rendering the fish edible through a process that is very similar to cooking? So is that subject to bishul akum or not? So Chizki, Yashari, Rabbi Yochanan, Aser. So Machlokas, Chizki and Rabbi Yochanan. Beitza tzluya, bar kapara shari, Rabbi Yochanan, Aser. A roasted egg, like a hard-boiled egg, or here it's a hard roasted egg. So you have a machlokas. One mandomer says it's okay. Why? Because the shell creates a boundary, a buffer between the food and the akum, and therefore it's hermetically sealed, and therefore you don't have to worry about kashrus issues. But the Rabbi Yochanan says no, that too is aser. And like we talked about yesterday, If you're traveling, don't eat hard-boiled eggs just because you think there's nothing that could be wrong. Ki asa Rav Dimi Amar echad dag maliach v'echad beit tzluya chizkiya bar kapara shov Rabbi Yochanan asa. So Rav Dimi comes along and he says, you actually combine those two shitas. In other words, the two permissive shitas to permit a salted fish and a roasted egg are on one side. Those are two opinions of bar kapara and chizkiya. And Rabbi Yochanan is the only one who's machmir on both and says it's prohibited. And on that basis, we have the following story. Rabbi Chia parva iklu lebe reish galusa amrulei beitzat sluya mai amr lehu chizkiya bar kapara shov Rabbi Yochanan aser vein dvarv shel echad b'makom shnayim. Rabbi Chia parva once comes to the house of the reish galusa. Now these are people who are concerned about Yiddishkeit but are also marginally not such nice people. And they ask him, tell us, we know we have to keep the laws of kashrus, so what's the law regarding hard-boiled eggs? And, are we allowed to have a Gentile cook it for us? So he says to them, well, it's 2 against 1. Chizki and Bar Kapara say it's mutter. Rabbi Yochanan says it's asur. So 2 against 1, you can follow the lenient position. So Amar Luhu Reb Zvid lo tatzisu lei hachi Amar Rabbi hilchas hakavasi de Rabbi Yochanan. So Reb Zvid is listening in, and he says, don't listen to this Rabbi Chia Parva, even though it's 2 against 1, but the one is Rabbi Yochanan, and Abaya says we paskin like Rabbi Yochanan here, and so therefore both the salted fish and the roasted egg are prohibited because of bishul akum. Ashkiyuha naguta dechalav enach nafshe. As you see, the people of the Reish Galusa's house, they're not very savory people. They were not happy with Rav Zvid's response. They basically said, wrong answer. Here, have this to drink. They give him some kind of vinegar drink that has toxicity. He drinks it and he dies. Tanu Rabban. Okay, I'm just telling you. The lesson, the moral of the story is, when you go to the Reish Galusa's house, don't answer kashrus shailas. Tanu Rabbanan. Hakafrisan v'hakaflutos v'hamatalia v'hachamin v'hakloyos shalohen mutarin, but beitza tzluya asura. So the Brisa now says kafrisan. What are kafrisan? They're the caper flower, or the caper leaf. So these things are not subject to bishul akum, either because they are eaten raw, they can be eaten raw, or for any number of other reasons, as we'll see. Kaflutos, Rashi says that kaflutos are leeks, they can also be eaten raw, and matalia, we don't know what that is, we'll see that in just a minute. Chamin is heated water. Since water doesn't essentially change from its original form in any way, it's perfectly fine for a goy to heat up water. And roasted or parched grain also does not change from its original form, and therefore it's also perfectly fine. And also, those are okay, but a roasted egg is asur. And shemen, Reb Yehuda Anasi ubeistino nimno alav v'hitiru. And like we learned yesterday, oil originally was banned, but then Rabbi Yehuda Nasiya, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's grandson, came along and was materit. Tanya, he hamatalia, he pashalia, he shi'asa. So what is matalia? So it's pashalia, which is the same thing as shi'asa. Shkoyach, what do those words mean? So my shi'asa, what is shi'asa? Amar Rabba bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, ha'arboin shnin denafik hayuvda mimitzrayim, v'Rabba bar Barchana didei Amar hashisin shnin denafik hayuvda mimitzrayim, v'lo pligi mar bishnei umar bishnei. So he says like this, Rabbi bar Barchana was a student of Rabbi Yochanan. He was 20 years younger than Rabbi Yochanan, apparently. Rabbi Yochanan had said, this shi'asa concoction is something that was introduced to us from Egypt 40 years ago. And Rabbi bar Barchana says, by my time, it's already been 60 years. And that's the way, they're not arguing, of course. Each one is providing perspective based on when they lived. So, my havu avdi, so what did they do? So the Gemara, or Heichi avdu, what did they do? Maisu bizra de karpisa, ubizra de kisna, ubizra de shavlalisa. They bring in 3 types of seeds. One is called the karpis seed, some kind of leafy vegetable, like lettuce perhaps, or cress. And then they bring the flax seed, and then they bring the fenugreek seed. They mix them, all the seeds up together in lukewarm water. V'shav kulei ademekabel. They leave it alone. They let it rest until it starts to sprout. Umaisi chatz v'chadeti umalaluhu maya v'toru buhu gargishto umedabkin bei. So then what they do is they transfer these seeds to an earthenware container that they fill with water and clods of earth, and they attach the seeds to the clods of earth that are in this earthenware vessel. And then, va'aylan lebeibani, adunafku malav levi va'achlu minayu. So then they go to the bathhouse. This was the Egyptian practice. They go to the bathhouse, and the hour that they're in the bathhouse, during that time, these sprouts grow into full-grown grassy growth. And when they come out of the bathhouse, they eat it. And what's the purpose of eating it? V'kairi mi binasa dereishayu aturfa dekarayu. It cools them off. When you come out of the bathhouse, you're very hot from the hot water. So you need something that's refreshing that will cool you. So instead of the iced tea with the ice cubes, which they didn't have in those days, they ate some cool, cressy kind of plant. But what happened very bizarrely is that they just started off as seed sprouts, and in that short time, from the time you went into the bathhouse to the time you came out, there was this whole grassy, cressy kind of growth that you could eat. And it would cool you off from the hair on your head to the toes on your feet. So Amar Avashi, Amar li Rabbi, and by the way, what we're saying is that there's no problem of bishul akum because the water is not hot enough to really cook it. It's really just more of an agricultural thing. Amar Avashi, Amar li Rabbi Chanina milin, va'amri la bim milin. So Rav Ashi says that Rabbi Chanina told me that this is a bubamaisa. That's what milin means. There's no way that these seeds can grow so much in the hour that you're in the bathhouse. And some say it's bimilin, which means that it's using incantations to make it grow magically quickly. Like Jack and the Beanstalk, right? Tana Rabbana, hakuspan shalobid b'chavim shehuchmu chamin biyora shehuchmu chamin biyora gedola asur biyora ketana mutter. So you have this thing called kuspan, which Rashi says is date discards. In other words, they would take, I guess, the husks or some other byproduct of the date, and you can't eat it raw. You can only eat it in its cooked state, because otherwise it's really not edible. And if you put it in a small pot to cook, it's okay. It's no problem of bishul akum. But if you put it in a large pot, it's not okay. So as we'll see in a moment, what we're talking about is our concern. Here, it's, I guess there's less of a concern. There may be a concern about bishul akum because it can't be eaten when it's edible. But as we'll see, the Gemara, I think, is going to modify its position, and it's basically going to tell us that the issue over here is this pot something that is used to cook non-kosher items? If it's used to cook non-kosher items, so then it's a problem. Because of what? Because tam ki'ikr. We hold that the flavor that absorbs into the pots will come out into the cooked food. So even though the cooked food itself may be kosher, but the flavor that is pulled out of the pots from, let's say, the chazer that he cooked a few hours ago will absorb back into this concoction, and that's what makes it aser. So if it's a very small pot, where we can rest assured that he's not cooking treifah stuff in it, so then it's okay. And what's the definition of a small pot? If you can't fit a wild pigeon's head into you can't fit a wild pigeon into the pot. V'dilma admuye yadmuha va'ayaluha. But one second, even if you can't fit a full pigeon, maybe you could dismember the pigeon and then cook it in the pot by sticking it in one limb at a time. So ella kol she'ein rosh sipor dror yochel likones b'socha. So you're right. What we mean is that even after dismembering the bird, you would not be able to fit the head in. And therefore you can rest assured that the goy presumably is not going to use this to cook animal tissue. And therefore you don't have to worry about flavor coming out of the pot and asering the item. The hatanya echas yora gedola v'echas yora ketana mutter. But there's another brisa that says even if it's cooked in a big pot, it's okay. Lo kasha hakaman domer nosein tam lifgam aser hakaman domer nosein tam lifgam mutar. So the way to reconcile it is to say that we're talking about two different opinions. One opinion states that as long as you can reasonably assume that the goy did not use this pot since yesterday, any flavor that emits from the pot is going to be bad tam, because over the course of a day, whatever absorbed flavor is in the pot is what's called nosein tam lifgam.
We did this a couple days ago.
Yeah, the flavor that comes out is bad flavor, and therefore
It's okay.
it doesn't contribute in a positive way, and therefore we don't say tam ke'ikr. But the other man da'amr says that no, even if it's been a day or longer, whatever flavor comes out is still has some substance to it, and it's going to be problematic.
What do we hold today?
We hold nosein tam lifgam is mutter, but only b'di'evet. Lechatchila,
You're not supposed to do it.
you're not allowed to use a goy's pot to cook with.
But if you did it,
But if you did
That's for
b'di'evet,
that day.
it's right. Right. Amar Rav Sheshes, Hai mishcha shlika de armoi aser. Rav Sheshes also says that boiled oil that's done by an Aramean is prohibited. So Amar Rav Safra, L'mai nechoshla, imi shum yaruve misrasri, imi shum b'shula evde kochavim nechol kamoshu chai. I don't understand what the problem with this cooked oil is. If you're worried he's going to add some prohibited oil, wine, let's say, that'll spoil it. That's not going to contribute to its flavor. He's not going to do that. If it's because you're worried about bishul akum, it's nechel kamoshu chai. It can be eaten in its raw state. So what's the problem? Imishum geula of the kochavim nosein tam lifgamhu umutter. And if it's because of the flavor that's going to be pulled out of the pot, I hold that nosein tam lifgam is mutter because it's adding a bad flavor, not a positive flavor. So therefore, Rav Safra says this Aramean cooked oil is perfectly fine.
To say that min b'shein amir is wotl b'shishim.
Yeah, but the problem is that usually you don't have shishim when you measure the walls of the pot. That's the general klal, that the contents of a pot are not 60 times the volume of the walls of the pot. That's the hanacha that the Gemara makes throughout Maseches Chulin. Bo minei me Rebbe Asi, hani ahini shliki darmoi mai. So the Gemara's question now is, what about these boiled dates that are made by Arameans? What's the halacha? So, chulye lo tiboy lach devadai sharu. If they're already sweet in their raw state, that's not a shaylik. Since they're nechel kamoshu chai, it's not a problem of bishul akum. Meriri lo tiboy lach devadai asiri. If they're bitter in their raw state, and the only way to eat them is by cooking them, so then it's taka a problem of bishul akum, it's for sure aser. Kitiboy lach mitzi oi mai. The question is, what if they're sort of in between? They're neither totally sweet, nor are they totally bitter, but so you could eat them raw, but not so good. So what's the halachas? Amar lahu maiti boy lahu de Rebbe asar umano levi. So he said back to them, what's your shaila? My Rebbe already paskin that they're asar, and what's your Rebbe's name? His name is Levi. Now shtisa'ah. Now we have another kind of concoction. Rashi says it's made up. This is a shtisa. Is a tavshil, it's a cooked kind of like farina or cereal that's made either out of either a wheat or barley base or it's a lentil base. They take, but it's both. It could be both. It could be chopped up or ground up wheat or ground up lentils, and then they mix it with other stuff. Now the issue is that with the lentil kind, they add vinegar to it to sort of take off some of the sweetness of the lentils. That's what the Gemara says. So Rav Shari Avua de Shmuel v'Levi Asri. So Rav says it's permitted, and Shmuel's father and Levi say it's asr. Now b'chiti v'sari kuliyama lo pligi de Shari, b'talfichi de Chala kuliyama lo pligi de asr. So everyone agrees that if it's a wheat or barley based, where they don't add vinegar, it's perfectly fine. And I suppose the reason why it's okay is either because it's not oila al shulchan melachim, or maybe it's nechel kamoshu chai. I'm not really sure, but the Gemara says it's not a problem of bishul akum. But the question is, are there additives that are going to be non-kosher? So when it comes to the wheat-based one, there's no additives that you have to worry about, and it's perfectly fine, right? The barley one where they add vinegar, everyone holds that that's usher because vinegar is made with wine. Ki pligi betalfachi demaya. Mar savar gazrinan ha'atu ha mar savar lo gazrinan. The question is, what if it's lentil-based, but they tell you they made it with water? So in that situation, one opinion says it's fine, and the other opinion says no, all lentil-based shtisas are usher because if we permit you with the water one, you'll come to eat the vinegar one. V'ika da amri, others learned, betalfachi damaya kol yamalo pligi da aser, ki pligi b'chiti v'sari. Others learned that everyone agrees that any lentil-based shtisa is aser. The question, because we're just going to cross the board aser it, even if it's with water. The question is, what about a wheat or barley-based shtisa, where they don't normally add vinegar? Do we say that that's aser lest you come to eat the lentil one or not? So Umar Savar Gazrina Ha'atuha, Umar Savar Lo Gazrina. So one opinion says we're machmir, and the other one says we're not. Amar Rav Trei Mine Shtisa Shadar Barzilai Hagil Adi LeDavid. Barzilai Hagil Adi, who was one in David's entourage, gave him two different types of shtisa, the ones that we've just discussed. And how do we know this? The pasuk says, Mishkav v'sapos uchli yotzer, v'chitu musorim v'kemach v'koli. The first part of the pasuk says that he gave him wheat and barley flour that was roasted, and then it says upul va'adoshim v'koli, and then it says the bean and lentil roasted kind. So we see that he gave him both. So v'hashtahu dekamafki tzani tzani l'shuka denahar dov v'les techayish lahadavua d'shmol v'levi. Nowadays, the Gemara says in Bavel, our minhag is to be totally makel on this kind of shtisa. There are baskets and baskets full of shtisa that are sold in the marketplaces of Nahar Da, and no one is machmir like Shmuel's father and like Levi to be machmir. What's not clear from this last line of the Gemara is which version are we going according to? Are we saying that all shtisas, including the lentil kind, are permitted as long as it doesn't have vinegar? Or are we saying only the wheat and barley kind are permitted, but the lentil kind are not? That's a little bit ambiguous. We're going to leave that for another time. Let's just quickly do another few lines. Pickled vegetables, like pickles, that are made with a brine, that have wine in them, we also said that those are aser ba'achila, but they're not aser ba'hana. Amar Chizki eloshanu ela shedarkan. Aval biyadua aser afilu bahana. That's only when they many times add wine, but you don't know for sure. But if you know for sure that they've put wine in it, not only can you not eat it, but you can't even get hana because of stam yena, right? Umayshna mimurias deshara rabbanan bahana. But wait a minute, why is it any different from a fish brine, where the Mishnah all the way back on Daf Chavtes said that there's a machlokas between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Meir as to whether fish brine, which may have wine in it, is it everyone agrees it's aser because of the wine, but the Rabbanan say it's only aser b'achila, but not b'hana. Why are you saying that this is aser b'hana, this pickle juice, whereas the fish brine is not aser only b'achila, it's not aser b'hana? So the Gemara answers, Hasam la'avurei zuah mahachal mesukei taima. So the Gemara says they're two different things. They add wine to the fish brine in order to take the edge off the fish brine, but the flavor of the wine is not detectable. But here they add wine to this pickle juice to add a flavor of wine to the pickle juice. So that's the reason it's much more detectable, and that's the reason why we're more machmir over here. So just an important point in the manufacture of liquor. Southern Comfort, for example, they add wine to Southern Comfort to add flavor to it, so that's going to be a problem. Just one point of reference. There is a kosher version of Southern Comfort.
It's made in Ireland.
And it has a kosher label on it, yeah. And Rabbi Yochanan Amar, afilu bi'adua nami mutter. And Rabbi Yochanan says, I disagree. I hold even if you know that there's wine added to this pickle juice, it's going to be mutter bahana, just aser ba'achila. Why then did Reb Meir on Daf Chavtes say that Murias is worse? It's even aser bahana, the fish brine. So hasam yadia mamasho hachalo yadia mamasho. And the answer is, the way Rashi explains it, is by pickle juice, you're not interested in eating the brine. You pull out the pickle out of the jar and you leave the brine behind. But over here, when it comes to the Murias, the fish brine, it's used as a salad dip. You use it as a dip, so therefore, since your mamish want to eat it, Rabbi Meir was more machmer to say it's aser bahana. And finally, v'taris truf of itzir she'ein badaga v'chulei. We learned about other substances which the Chachamim forbade for eating, and one of those things was called the chilik fish. And the question is, what is this chilik fish? So Amar Rav Nachman bar Abba Amar Rav Zu Sultanis Rashi had explained in the Mishnah that it's a type of kosher species of fish, but it doesn't grow its fins and scales until it gets more mature. And when you first see it in the container, it looks like it doesn't have any fins and scales, but you know that it's kosher because eventually it will. The problem is the Goyim mix the earvone fish, which is a non-kosher species of fish, together with the sultanis, and it's very difficult to tell the difference between the two. And therefore the Chachamim banned the sultanis fish as well, even though it's a kosher species. We'll hold it here for today. Have a wonderful day. Rabbi Chanan ben Akasha Omer Ratzah HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakos